I think a lot of that was kind of pushed so that it would be, there's going to be a lot more review of some of those issues in the 2024 NDCTP when it gets filed, largely because SB 846 kind of came out right in the middle of the NDCTP proceeding. So it came out after testimony had been submitted for the most part, and I think the agreement, at least amongst the parties in that proceeding, was that a lot of those issues were not going to be discussed in that NDCTP, and they're going to be discussed in the future NDCTP. As more of SB 846 is implemented and we have a clear understanding of how everything's going to work going forward. I know one issue in that, probably the most contentious issue anyway, was a refund of decommissioning trust money in the non-qualified trust, and that'll be, there's an advice letter out. I can't remember if that one has been completed or if there's one pending and one completed. Either way, I think the way the advice letter is written, I think the money would be refunded to ratepayers at the end of the year or by January 1st. And then there's also another proceeding, and I'm going to look up the number of it right now. There's another proceeding that was just filed less than maybe a month ago, A23-10-009. PG&E filed that at the beginning of October, and that has to do with the employee retention program that's been in place since 2019 to keep workers at Diablo Canyon. I know other parties on this call have filed protests or have filed to participate in that. I don't have much to add on it because it was literally just filed a few weeks ago, and nothing is on the schedule yet. So I don't have too much to add to it other than to say it's just about the employee retention program going forward as a result of SB 846. So those are the CPUC proceedings that are dealing with Diablo Canyon. I think we can move forward to the next item on the agenda here since we're at 10:20. If I could throw it over to PG&E, I know there's a list of questions there for PG&E. Mark, I think you're on the. I think I saw you on the call here. Mark, if you could kind of get started and kind of, I know your answers for these questions are going to be a little more limited. I don't think it's going to. Yeah, I don't think it's going to take 40 minutes to go through this, but to the best of your ability and your team's ability, could we kind of go through some of the questions on this list here?
So Gerald Strickland, who many know has come back to consult with the company, he will address these.
Good morning.
Good morning. Gerald, you must have another speaker on there. Give us a moment while Gerald gets, there's just got to be 2 mics in his room, probably. Give us a moment.
I'll check, but I don't think I have another mic.
We've got it now. That was it.
Yeah, it's fixed now.
Great, thanks. So I'm Gerald Strickland. With me is Jeff Bachhoover, who's the Director of Geosciences, and in turn will be available to answer any specific questions. Today, I will be providing a high-level overview of our process and will not cover specific activities or findings to date. As you know, Senate Bill 846 has a requirement for PG&E associated with Diablo Canyon in the form of a covenant that the operator shall conduct an updated seismic assessment. In that, we completed a SHAC Level 3 in 2015, which was subsequently reviewed and accepted by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We chose to use a process outlined in New Reg 2213 to perform a new assessment. Under New Reg 2213, which is geared for facilities that do have an existing SHAC that had been recently performed, there's a 2-step process. First is to conduct a SHAC Level 1 study using any new information that became available since the original SHAC study was completed. From there, compare existing study probabilistic seismic hazard analysis with the results of the Shack Level 1 to determine if any update is needed. For this effort, we're using an organizational structure that is similar to a Shack Level 3 in overall structure and staffing, except we've added an additional layer of external review by the UCLA Garrick Risk Institute. We believe that that gives us some additional external validation and verification that the process has been appropriately developed and appropriately implemented. A work plan was developed and coordinated with DWR and the Diablo Canyon Independent Safety Committee. A team of experts was assembled, including some that worked on the previous Shack Level 3 assessment. We've held 3 workshops with attendance by regulatory observers from DWR and the Independent Safety Committee. As part of this assessment, we are evaluating new information on seismic source and models, seismicity, and ground motion models. This includes specific studies on fault slip rates, coastal uplift, geodetics, earthquakes, offshore studies, and ground motion models. A portion of our evaluation specifically includes an evaluation of Dr. Bird's models and comments. The final report will include a detailed discussion on that evaluation of Dr. Bird's materials. We are on track to complete the assessment by the end of January 2024. We're expecting to cover the details of the findings with the IPRP around the end of the first quarter of 2024. The assessment includes a sensitivity evaluation for potential impacts on our seismic probabilistic risk assessment and is being performed and summarized in the report. We don't have any details to date because the report is ongoing, but we'll be in a position to be able to report it out in the first quarter of 2024 to the IPRP. The assessment is not required as a component of the license renewal application that was just submitted to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, although the report itself will be available for any NRC review in the future if they deem appropriate. Questions?
Just for anybody on the call, if you want to answer a question, just there's a little raise your hand button at the top of the screen. Please click that so I can see who's trying to answer. Looks like Bob. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I missed the part of your discussion talking about the Dr. Bird's materials review and disposition. Roughly, where are you guys with looking over his materials with respect to your project?
We've gone through quite an extensive review of his model and of other comments provided in his assessment. And in turn, the team is in the process of writing the written response.
Thank you.
Gordon, please go ahead. Gordon, you're on mute.
You hear me now? Yeah. The question I have is, considering the Shack level that your application falls under, you mentioned the Shack 3
organizational structure.
Organizational structure now, but what is your how are you organized for this application?
So we're using the organizational structure that you see published for a Shack Level 3. Although if you go into New Reg 2213, it has a set of requirements for how you step forward if you have an existing Shack Level 3. And under that, the initial steps then are to perform a Shack Level 1 that does more of a qualitative assessment of all the information material that may have changed since you performed the Shack Level 3.
Right, but I guess my understanding is that the difference between a shock level 1 and a shock level 2 involves like a shock 2 would be necessary if there's a significant revision or refinement to one or more components
Correct.
that go into the input.
Right. So in essence, if there is significant changes identified, then you would expand the overall program and extend into a shock level 2.
So when does that decision occur?
That decision has occurred.
So you've decided there has not been a significant change in the input parameters?
So far, that's our conclusion, and that in essence, there's still additional modeling work that's being performed, but there has been no significant findings to date.
See, yeah, okay, well, we'll talk about some of the details later. Okay.
Bruce, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think my question may be a detail on what Gordon was asking. Again, the understanding of the analysis is that the first test is whether new information has shown up. I guess the question I have is, how about reviewing the uncertainty in previous materials that were submitted? Is there a thorough review of the quality of the old information that was provided? And in particular, in a very broad sense, one of the issues that has been on my mind for a while is the understanding of the tectonic structure of the Irish Hills. At a point when the seismic exploration was conducted there, it didn't seem at all clear what that tectonic structure is, and I'm wondering whether any refinement of that understanding has been made and whether that is part of the process in assessing this hazard.
Jeff, you want to weigh in on that?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that question. We are looking at the quality of the previous data, so that's part of the work, Bruce. Also, new studies that have occurred since 2015, and then looking at those potential impacts. We are looking at the uplift of the Irish Hills, and so that is a component that we're evaluating.
And just for the record, you'll recall that when IPRP looked at the reflection seismology across the Irish Hills, we didn't feel there was any definitive, or at least that was my opinion. It may have been written up a little more generically, but there wasn't definitive evidence of one sort of geologic structure or another apparent in the reflections seismology materials there. So I'd be curious, as we look at this when it comes out, what kind of extra information has been provided that might speak to what kind of tectonics we're looking at there.
Yeah, and we'll have that described in the report specifically. One recent paper that has come out is by O'Connell and Turner, who were doing that work, and their findings are suggesting that the total uplift could be accommodated by strike slip faulting on just the Hosgri. So that's like one idea that we're carefully looking at, but that will be documented in the report, Bruce.
Thank you.
Joseph, please go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is, does your process have the flexibility to add new analysis, supplemental reports, and so on in response to comments by this body, by the safety committee, the public, after the final report is released?
I believe that there's the opportunity under the long-term seismic program to be able to perform additional studies, additional work that may be requested in comments from external bodies.
Do you mind if I add to that a little bit too? So you're familiar with the long-term seismic program. We are continuing the program through the operating life of the plant. And through this SB 846 project, we are also identifying some additional ideas for continued long-term seismic research. And so those will be presented, as we continue our engagement next year. But this has been identifying some things that would be good continued long-term seismic program projects.
Ja, please go ahead.
Thank you, David. So you referenced new reg 2213, and then at chapter 4, to run the level 1 shack analysis, there are 6 they call it decision factors, and then number 6 says the comparison of risk or performance to target goals. And here it specifically say, in any case, the choice of risk objectives and criteria should be determined and agreed upon, preferably at the start of the overall existing study evaluation process by the owner and regulators. So my question is, what was the goal, the risk objective and criteria that you had agreed upon, which lead you to determine is to replace, revise, or update the existing the existing study, and then to the level 3?
Jeff, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thank you. And also I see that we have Bill Horstman on. Bill, are you available? Because I may bring you in for this. Our first step was to take a look at what existing data is available. We are performing sensitivity analysis. So where we have new information, we are checking to see what the potential impact of that would be. And then we do carry that through by performing, and Gerald went through this in his summary, some sensitivity evaluation of impacts of any new information on the seismic PRA. And so that's an element of what we're doing. Bill, if you want to add to that.
Yes, hello, this is Bill Horstman. I'm a structural engineer in the Geosciences Department of PG&E. Yes, we're just working on the planning of this. We are looking at the output of the seismic hazard analysis, the PSHA, and what that does to the plant response analysis, how the buildings behave in an earthquake, and then the component fragilities, the equipment within the buildings that are required for safe operation and shutdown of the plants. So we're currently assessing the effect of the potential changes in the seismic hazard on the building response, on the equipment fragilities. Those will then feed into the seismic probabilistic risk assessment and come up with deltas, what may change as far as our core damage frequency and our large early release frequency. So we're running the basically the hazards all the way through to the risk numbers, which is the ultimate output of the seismic probabilistic risk assessment.
Bill, thank you. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. Yeah, you answered my question. So what was the criteria as determined if the change is significant or not to the frequency of core damage or the large release of material?
I don't have the number off the top of my head. I believe it's, oh God, what we just talked about this the other day. I think it was a change either 1 × 10⁻⁶ or 0.5 × 10⁻⁵. I know we looked at both of those, so I can't give you the actual number we're looking at right now, but I know we're staying within what the NRC is considered a reasonable range when they compared all of the CDFs and LRFs from the Fukushima response that was submitted back in 2018. So we're staying within the guidance that the NRC established for accepting the updated seismic PRAs. But we would have to get back to you on the actual acceptance criteria we are using for this.
Please do. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gordon?
I have a question, something that you mentioned, Jeff. You mentioned that you ran a sensitivity analysis with some of the major changes. For instance, the higher Hosgry slip rate that's been published now in several papers.
That's correct.
So my understanding is if you run this kind of sensitivity analysis and you're reaching out to outside external experts, then that raises it to a shock level 2.
Yeah, we have kept to the guidance of shock level 1, Gordon, and so we don't have workshops, let's say, incorporating proponent resource experts. We are using existing papers, the expertise of our internal group, our participatory peer review panel. And so that's where we've taken it to this shock level 1 process.
But even the fact that you're running the sensitivity analysis, if you look at the NRC guidelines, that's already raising it to shock level 2.
Sure, you could claim some of the elements, the approaches we're using. We are following, as Gerald went through, new Reg 2213, it does specify a shock level 1 is the appropriate level to start an assessment of any new information after completion of a shock level 3. We're not saying if there's something that we need to do that's not strictly within a shock level 1, like sensitivity studies, that we are performing that. And as I recall, sensitivity studies are included in the shock level 1 process. I don't think you have to go to shock level 2 to incorporate those.
And I think really with is looking at significance. And so by doing the sensitivity studies, you're determining whether or not any changes in information are significant.
Yeah, well, I mean, what distinguishes the shock level 1 from a 2 specifically is listed in the updated shock guidelines as sensitivity analyses.
Yeah,
and
one thing too, I wouldn't get too caught up on definition of shock level 1 to 2. What we're doing is an assessment of new information. We're accounting for the center, body, and range impacts of any of those. We're incorporating the technically defensible interpretations. And so the shock level 1 is an appropriate level to do that type of work and compare how we sit regarding the past work, impact of any new information.
Right. I guess what I'm asking is if we haven't seen the sensitivity analyses, but if they show that there is a shift in the center body range of some of the main inputs, there is a possibility then it then gets raised to a shock level 2?
We're completing the study as we have defined. We have a formal work plan that we reviewed with DWR in the DCISC, and that's what we're going forward. But we are looking. So as we have any changes to the center body and range, we're performing the sensitivity analysis and then carrying that through to compare against the seismic PRA as Bill Horstman discussed.
Okay.
So, Jeff or Gerald or anyone from PG&E, could you just kind of restate when the seismic assessment is supposed to be completed and submitted, and when, for example, when the NRC gets it, that sort of thing, and when anyone here at the IPRP would be able to look at it, as well as the DCISC is too.
So the Independent Safety Committee has attended each of the workshops, and so they've been able to observe the process, and in turn will receive a copy for review of the final report after the end of January. Same with DWR. From there isn't a requirement to submit it to the NRC, although we will advise the NRC that it has been completed and that it's available if they choose to review it.
What seismic study items, if any, are being submitted or considered by the NRC in the license renewal?
I don't believe that there's any additional seismic updates that are required as part of license renewal.
Well, regardless of whether they're additional, but what additional or existing, what existing items would be submitted then?
Well, existing items, then there have been specific questions associated with what is the overall seismic hazard for Diablo, defining what is safe shutdown earthquake. So they've asked questions associated with design earthquake, double design earthquake, Hashgree, and then LTSP as to how each of those seismic inputs are utilized for the design and or evaluation of the plant. So all that is specifically covered in the application. But no new information, just essentially what is the licensing basis of the plant.
Okay, are there any further questions? John Giesman, it looks like your hand is raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, it is, David.
Okay.
This is John Giesman, representing the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. Gerald, I had two questions for you. One is that your prior SHAC Level 3 process included an overt effort to make the proceedings accessible to the public. I recognize your internal audits determined that there were quality assurance problems during those years in geosciences, but I'm wondering why you did not make this process publicly accessible. My second question relates to what appears to be your decision not to update the Enercon study, which addressed in 2009 300 Class 2 non-safety SSCs, with the State General Fund putting nearly $1.5 billion into the plant for reliability purposes. Why wouldn't you consider evaluating those non-safety components, which may have a very profound effect on the plant's ability to restart after an earthquake?
Thanks, John, for your questions. As far as to whether or not the overall seismic assessment would be completely open to the public, that decision was made before I got involved, so I really don't have an answer for you. As far as the Intercon study update, that when you look at the overall conclusions of the Intercon study, and then associate it with additional work that was performed on some of the critical components, such as the thrust bearings for the turbine, the conclusions were that overall that downtime for the plant would be within the bounds and confines of what would be expected for a duration that wouldn't impact the overall duration of time for a restart of the plant. An example of that is thrust bearings for Intercon. They originally noted that after approximately 0.2 G accelerations, that there was a potential for damage to the thrust bearings that could impact the ability of the plant to start, and that downtime could be extensive in the range of 9+ months. Subsequent studies by the bearing manufacturer were able to conclude that for up to 0.5 G accelerations, that there would be some local yielding of a support plate under the bearing, but that there would be no interaction with fixed blades and turning blades in the turbines. And so therefore, they concluded that the bearing would continue to be operable. For the full 0.7 G zero period acceleration, they concluded that there would be damage to the bearing, but not to the extent that would cause the fixed and turning blades to interact. And so therefore the downtime would be more than likely no more than 30 days to be able to replace bearings and put the facility back into operation. So in essence, that it's not expected that there would be material change in the conclusions associated with the probabilistic seismic hazard, and therefore there is no basis for going back and either redoing the intercon study or performing a new study.
Well, the bearings are 1 out of the 300 Class 2 SSCs.
That was the critical. That was by far the most critical aspect of the conclusions of the intercon report. The intercon report showed that the other structures, systems, and components that were evaluated had substantial margin, and the duration of time for the facility to be down as a result of damage to any of those components was relatively short.
Yeah, the Intercon study used a 120-day outage as its screen, which I think the State General Fund with $1.5 billion of exposure would probably want a more demanding standard than 120 days. At least I'd hope so.
Linda, please feel free to ask away.
Good morning. Thank you. I have just a curiosity. If your report, I'm sorry, I'm from Mothers for Peace. If the seismic assessment isn't going to be submitted till the end of the first quarter of 24, how can the CPUC possibly make a rational judgment about extending the life of Diablo?
David, is that for you?
Yeah, that sounds like it's probably more for me. Linda, thanks for the question, and I understand where you're coming from. I would just reiterate the proposed decision right now that approves the extension for an additional 5 years is still contingent on the I'm trying to word this properly, the NRC license and reliability questions and cost effectiveness questions that are ongoing. So it says this in the PD, which I'm sure you may have looked at, but while this PD does approve the extension, it doesn't mean that we can't revisit new information that may impact the judgment of whether an extension, the full 5 years, is necessary or less. And I think that's relayed in the PD. If you don't feel that it is, and it needs to be clear, I invite you to please say that when you submit your comments in a week. But it is not, as I understand the proposed decision, it is not. There is still opportunity for new information to impact what may happen with the lifespan of the plan.
I'm talking about after the final decision, before the end of the year. I'm not talking about the preliminary decision.
Well, the preliminary decision and the final decision interact. A lot of what's in the proposed decision will ultimately be in the final decision. Right. And Yeah, and so, like I said, like if the NRC licensing application gets rejected, like hypothetically, if it got rejected, we would obviously have to, revisit everything and say that the plant has to, shut down. And I think the timeline within the PD and that PG&E has proffered is 6 months, right? And if there are other determinations, for example, the proposed decision requires PG&E to submit much more extensive forecast information for the cost of the plant to allow further evaluation of the cost, obviously, because it was determined that there wasn't enough information. And so, like I said, there are other ways for us. There are other opportunities to review and revisit the 5-year extension if the evidence is there.
And will that be reviewed after the final decision is made? Will there be periodic reviews on a schedule, or no?
Well, for instance, the cost information is PG&E is required in the proposed decision to submit all of that cost information by March 29th when they have to submit their first forecast application. So that's an opportunity right there to take that information and re-examine it or examine it for the first time. I mean, it's information that hasn't been presented in the way that we're asking before. And the NRC, the NRC licensing, for example, if once that comes out, that they have to submit, I believe it's a tier 3 advice letter informing us of that and seeking direct immediate review. I think the language in the SB 846 itself is an expedited tier 3 advice letter, which I'm not. I would say I don't know what an expedited exactly is supposed to mean, because that's not defined anywhere. But either way, there are those processes in place where these items can be reviewed, and then separately the loan from DWR, also as required under SB 846, if that gets terminated under that loan agreement for one reason or another, which a lot of which relates to reliability and cost questions, that's another circumstance where the time, the extension would have to be shortened, or we would have to kind of immediately revisit and re-examine.
Okay, thank you.
Bob Budnitz, please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hold on, I got to turn my sound down so you don't get an echo. Okay, if you can hear me. I'm Robert Budnitz from the Diablo Canyon Independent Safety Committee. The SB 846 legislation and how we've all understood it surely contemplates, and everybody I suppose agrees, that the DCISC is going to weigh in on the seismic issue. And although we already came up with a preliminary position recently, it says in plain English in that position that we're going to revisit our seismic evaluation based on 2 pieces of input. The first piece of input is this report from this independent panel, which we're only going to get after the first of the year. We don't even know when. And I'm not holding anybody's feet to the fire, just whatever it is. But if it's in January or February or whenever it is, we're going to get it, and we're on the stick to do an independent evaluation of it, and we're going to do that. We said so, and we will. And the second piece of information is that the plant has now sent in their license renewal application to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and there's a seismic section in there. And we're going to look at that too. Why? Because we want to make sure that we have all the available information that we need to make our independent evaluation. And if the NRC, in the course of going back and forth with the plant, has a request for additional information, or there's anything else that comes up, we'll be looking at that too. So I'm just merely explaining to the public here and to the IPRP that we're going to do that evaluation, but our schedule is contingent on when we receive the input that I just mentioned. Well, the license renewal has gone in. We haven't seen it yet, but we're going to see it in another few days when it's public. And then this new report is going to be after the first of the year. And everything we do is going to end up before the public in one of our public meetings, as we always do. All of our positions are adopted in a public meeting. Thank you.
Linda, please go ahead.
Sorry for asking another question, but who at the Independent Safety Committee is qualified to do seismic review? Do you have a team of seismologists that you're working with, or how are you actually? This doesn't appear to me to be an actual review if it's not performed by a team of seismologists. And that question is for Dr. Budnitz.
Linda, before Bob answers, I would just add that any reviews that the DCISC does, when they approve their, when they submit their findings and recommendations at their meetings, that occur, 3 times a year, whichever meeting that report ends up in, the IPRP is also charged under SB 846 with reviewing the DCISC's findings and submitting our comments back. And there are seismologists in the IPRP who would be looking at it. But Bob, please go ahead and respond as well.
Well, I have to plead guilty to admit that I missed the question.
Oh, the question was, the DCISC is going to review the report, the seismology findings from PG&E. But who at the DCISC is a seismological expert, and who's going to review it to make it be a meaningful review? Because it seems to me that in order to make a really meaningful review of a very important seismological report, it has to be reviewed by people who are qualified to review it.
Hold on. Fair enough. I don't want to be other than meek here, but on the DCISC, the seismic guy is talking to you. That's me. And we have others as well who are looking at all of this and have participated, but I suppose it's me with the others reviewing it. And for those that are unaware of the history here, I can tell the public that most of you probably know that when the Senior Seismic Hazard Analysis Committee, the so-called SHAC committee, did their work, I chaired the SHAC committee. That report I signed on to, I was the chairman of it. And I know as much about the SHAC process as anybody on the planet, probably, although there are many others with expertise as well. Okay. So I suppose on our group, it's going to be not only me, but I'll be the lead amongst our team.
Thank you.
Ja, please go ahead.
Thank you, David. A quick question, follow-up. Does the seismic study is part of the license renew submitted to the NRC?
I'm sorry, would you say that again?
I heard the comments that the DCIC will review the seismic study you submitted to the NRC for license renewal. But I thought that that was not a part of the license renewal requirement for NRC. So just want a clarification if that's included.
So this is Gerald Strickland. That I think what Bob was referring to is that there's a section in the license renewal application that goes through the detailed history on the seismic design and licensing basis of the plant. And so, that's what is part of this submittal. And it's detailed to where it goes through and even talks about all the seismic studies that were performed a number of years ago, work under the long-term seismic program. It does not include this assessment that we're performing, mainly because it wasn't required to.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Bob Budnitz. I think I can clarify what I had said. When any plant, including this one, submits a renewal application to the NRC, there's a standard list of things that they have to submit, a whole lot of stuff, all about fire protection and flooding and a whole gamut of things. And seismic is among them. But the best way to phrase the seismic part is that besides explaining what the current seismic licensing basis is for the NRC, the plant is obligated to explain or set out anything that's new. Okay? That is, they want it. Maybe there's something new that doesn't upset the previous understanding, but nevertheless, it's new. And the plant is presumably, I haven't seen the application yet. They submitted it a couple days ago, but we're going to get it in a few days. It'll be made public. And I assume that in there will be that explanation of what's new, and we're going to review it. Fair enough.
Okay. Well,
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thanks. I think we've gone through the PG&E section of the agenda. So, Gordon, why don't we move into the IPRP activities and just kind of some of the items we had been discussing that you were going to discuss with everybody.
Yeah. So here at CGS, we started reviewing new information that's come to light since the licenses were withdrawn last time. And there's several studies. There's a half dozen publications at least that have come out that directly apply to the inputs. Specifically, the one we're most concerned with, if we kind of set a priority of the factors, is the Hausgray slip rate. And the studies that have come out essentially double the slip rate. And there's several of them, but how they're being incorporated and what they do in a sensitivity analysis, we have not seen. I imagine that's part of this application. So we haven't reviewed how PG&E is using this information because we haven't had access to that yet. So that's the Hausgray slip rate. Another item is related to the ground motions. I don't know if Ree, do you want to speak to that? Are you there?
I can, but really, we really haven't had any technical documentations from PG&E to review. So I think ground motion part are kind of like the various input for seismic hazard analysis. Ground motion hazard analysis methodology itself also evolved considerably over the last few years. Specifically the agardic approach versus non-agardic approach. I don't want to get into too much detail, but I think our overall, what we need overall is the application of these new approaches to the DCPP site and actually look at what whether these new approaches would have any effect on the design ground motion as well as on hazard curves that go into risk assessment. But we really haven't had a chance to review the details. I would hope that we could somehow submit the summary that we wrote up, Gordon, to PG&E, and perhaps PG&E could give us a response of some sort for the continuity of our review from scientific point of view.
Yeah, I could say something to that. I think the plan is, or one suggestion was that the IPRP, after this meeting, we will issue a formal IPRP report that will list more details and all the items that we're concerned with requests to PG&E to clarify and provide the information that we need for a review. And some of that information is probably in the application, I imagine. But we have not seen a lot of the details. We haven't seen how new slip rate estimates have, it appears that most of the relevant slip rate estimates on the Hosgre Fault have changed significantly since the last application. But how they're being incorporated and what a sensitivity analysis does for the hazard, we have not seen. So but we could go through the items quickly now, and then with the understanding that we will issue a report after this meeting based on what we've heard, and then also just fleshing things out a little bit more with requests to PG&E.
Yeah, just to clarify, for Gordon, you're referring to that's the draft document we talked about the other day.
Yes.
Did that circulate just among your team and myself and Bob, or did it circulate among the entirety of the IPRP? I don't remember who else had a chance to look at it.
I had circulated it earlier, probably about a month ago, to all the members of the IPRP.
Okay.
But that but it wasn't a complete document. So.
Right. Yeah, no. So I don't know how much everyone remembers, but Gordon, like he said, he circulated amongst everyone. I think the idea would be to polish up. I mean, it was several drafts in already, so it's a good chunk of the work is already done. But the idea would be to polish that up, get a final version of that, then we could send that out to PG&E, and we can talk to PG&E about how, once they see it, we can figure out what an appropriate amount of time is to get a response. And both our document would be posted on the CPUC website with whatever the way we typically do, and when PG&E provides a response, we would post that up there as well, like we have in the past to previous seismic studies. Jeffrey, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to give a little bit of information. So this is relevant to your question, Gordon, about the seismic source characterization. A large amount of our effort is evaluating new information on the Hosgre Fault slip rate. So we have engaged with the researchers that have prepared the paper, performing the work, some of the offshore studies. We have Tom Rockwell and Steve Thompson from LCR taking the lead, but we are documenting that in a very transparent and clear method in the report to aid a reviewer. And so we'll have all the information, how we processed it, what type of sensitivity studies. So you'll have a very clear understanding of what we did with that. But we are definitely addressing the Hosgre slip rate comprehensively. For the ground motion characterization, we have reviewed any updates in the models, ergodic, non-ergodic. We have Norm Abramson, Linda Alatik, and Nick Rager working on those, so some leading experts in that area. And we are fully looking at that too. Are there any new models? Do we need to test those out? And so that's part of the study. Again, we're reporting this in a way that you could perform a review, and it'll be very transparent in the report.
Do we have a timeline on these? When we will receive this?
The end of January is when we're expecting to have the assessment complete.
It's just to follow up. So is the idea that the assessment will be done at the end of January and that the DCISC would be able to comment on it in their February meeting, or is it more likely that they're going to need some time and they would comment on it at their, I would assume their June meeting?
Well,
Hold on, this is Bob.
Okay.
This is Bob Budnitz. I can't tell you when we're going to have completed the evaluation. That we don't even know when we're going to get it, or how complex the evaluation will be. So that just depends. But the DCISC, that's me and a couple of consultants, have listened in and sat in on all three of the meetings of this evaluation panel. So we're not going to get something that we've not heard anything about, just at the end. We have already been listening in on the process and understand some of the issues, a lot of the issues, and the detail of what they're doing. So it's not going to come to us as something out of the clear blue sky. On the other hand, I can't tell you how long or how complex our independent evaluation is going to be. Depends on, you can finish my sentence for me. Okay. And by the way, it also depends on if we have issues and questions, we have to be able to ask them and get a response back, the clarifications, the sort of thing that the usual intellectual process of understanding something. But we're going to get on it and we'll do the best we can. We have a public meeting in February. And if we can get it, if we can get it by then, okay. And if we can't, we can't.
Bruce, please go ahead.
Thank you, David. The matter of ground motion has long been on the mind of the IPRP, and one or a couple of the issues that I haven't heard any updates recently had to do with more fully understanding the actual material properties near the plant, underlying the plant. There was a variety of information, some of it very old, that was not reconciled very well. And so the physical parameters of the materials directly under the plant were in some question. And so one question that I have is whether this assessment has any new information about that. The second thought, and goes to the ergodic versus non-ergodic, was that it was understood that to better understand the site response, some modeling, finite difference or finite element modeling of propagation through the best possible model of physical material parameters coming at different azimuths, et cetera, would be helpful in understanding the range of ground motions possible. And my question there is, has any of that been pursued, and is any of that available as new material for this assessment?
Do you want me to jump on that, Gerald?
Yes, please, Jeff.
Yeah. So Bruce, we don't have significant new on-site data, such as borings, seismic velocity surveys. So we're re-reviewing what we have, what has been collected, but we are looking for any new information to help evaluate things such as source path. That is being included in the update and review of any new types of techniques for evaluating ground motions.
Okay, well, I think that's a discussion with the IPRP and issuing a report and asking for information. That's a section that I think we should frame our issues clearly and ask, specifically how the probabilities or how the range of possibilities is being assessed in the absence or presence or absence of new information, again, immediately around the site. As I recall, that's the top line on our tornado diagram, the area of greatest uncertainty at this point.
Ja, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is a question for Bill from PG&E. So in the IPRP report we issued last, there are a few engineering-related questions on the PRA, mainly are about the structural components and system correlation. How are those handled in the PRA? I wonder that if it's possible to respond or give some explanation in your January report.
We can consider that. There is the report that we issued back in 2018 that explains the seismic PRA when we submitted it for the Fukushima near-term task force. I'm not familiar with the specific questions you have, but we could certainly look into those. I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Sure, those are the questions after reviewing the 2018 PRA study.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Yes, you're welcome.
So should I complete the list of items that we identified?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So the first item I mentioned was the Hausgray slip rate. The second were the ground motions that we just talked about. The third was, and these last few items are not necessarily prioritized somehow. But one item that came up is the use of PBRs, and it looks like you're not necessarily incorporating anything new from these, even though your studies are ongoing. Is that correct, Jeff?
Hi, Gordon. Yeah, that's correct. That work's still in flight. We're still developing a level of confidence around applying those studies. So that is not included in this SB 846 work.
Right. Okay. So that will be, we might have some requests on plans, and then you could present that at that point. The next item was the characterization of the Irish Hills. We're familiar with this new O'Connell and Turner paper that was published this year. And then it was touched on in Peter Bird's comment letter to the IPRP. So, but there are kind of two items there. One is fault structures surrounding or in the Irish Hills leading to uplift. So that's part of this O'Connell study. But the second issue is Peter Bird's specialty, more related to the Neokinema model. And so we had some questions on how that is being considered by PG&E. The next item was the tsunami hazard. How has there been any updates and how that will be part of the new application? And those are the main items that we've identified to date.
I would add, just from the CPUC side of things, that the tsunami hazard anyway, my recollection of the most recent NDCTP is that it requires submission of an updated tsunami hazard in the next NDCTP filing, which, if I'm remembering my schedule correctly, probably doesn't happen until the end of 2024, but it would be included as part of the testimony there. Which a little farther off than I think we're asking for here, but it just as so everyone kind of knows what the timeline is on some of this stuff.
CROPIS.
Okay, so I think we've finished our section. So I think I would like to open up the floor to questions from the general public. I'll start with Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. I don't know if Rochelle Becker, David Weissman, or John Giesman want to lead off, but you had submitted a question regarding quality control at PG&E. So if you'd like to kind of jump in on that, I'll leave it to you which person wants to discuss it.
This is John Giesman. I think the materials that Rochelle circulated to the panels speak for themselves. PG&E's own internal audits discovered a pretty substantial set of quality assurance problems in the geosciences department in their last set of seismic reviews. The only thing I would add to those materials is a deeply felt concern about the lack of public transparency in this process from PG&E's standpoint. That is not a mark of self-confidence or intellectual strength. And I would certainly thank the IPRP for bringing the small beam of light that you have to this process, and tell you that we and other members of the public are deeply reliant on you going forward to review this stuff. Thank you.
Just for our IPRP members, Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility sent that information out on October 27th. So just if you need to cycle back in your inbox, and I can recirculate that so everyone has it kind of front and center after the meeting. But we can talk about that separately and figure out how to, if there's any questions we want to distribute later on that topic as well. Mr. Byrd, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a brief comment just addressed to the IPRP. This season, we are all awaiting the SHAC Level 1 update of the seismic source characterization for Diablo Canyon. My hope is that this revision will finally include a recognition of crustal shortening and thrust faulting in the Irish Hills, and the likelihood of an active thrust fault beneath the plant. When this report is released, I hope that all IPRP members will also read it and make an independent judgment about whether the changes are complete, objective, and credible. Or alternatively and hypothetically, might the changes be described as minimal, semantic, and legalistic? In other words, it will be important to decide whether the updated seismic source characterization can be considered to be a best estimate of seismic hazard or merely a revision of the lower limit on seismic hazard. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments that, Ms. Seeley, please go ahead.
Thanks. Oh, whoops. Oh.
Oh, Linda, you went on mute.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to remind everybody here that Mothers for Peace has been investigating the condition of the Unit 1 reactor vessel, and we have we've engaged a very highly respected materials engineer from UC Berkeley. I would encourage all of you to read his report. The reason I'm bringing this up here is because your work becomes all the more important in light of the fact that this reactor vessel of Unit 1 is more than likely embrittled. And what that means is if there were an earthquake or something else that caused the would have to cause the unit one to go into cold shutdown by pouring cold water on it. The condition of the welds inside this reactor vessel is brittle. And what can happen if such a scenario would take place? I'm not saying it's going to. I'm saying it could, just like an earthquake. But it would be the worst kind of nuclear accident that can happen, the shattering of a reactor vessel that could it could ruin our entire state of California. And so it becomes incumbent upon you as the seismic experts to think about this when you're doing your work, because we so far have been unsuccessful with all we want is to get the inside of this reactor vessel inspected. And you probably know the history of it, that they were supposed to do it during this recent outage of Unit 1. They did not do it. They got permission from the NRC not to do it. They knew 10 years ago they couldn't do it, but still they didn't set up the conditions for doing it this time. And it's an outrage that they are allowed to operate like this. But it comes, it all comes back to protecting this place that we love, and where we have settled our roots and and our children and grandchildren are here. So I would hope that you look at this in a holistic way and understand that it's all connected. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. I would add, I know the DCISC is engaged with a consultant who's doing an embrittlement study review that I believe is going to be presented at the February meeting. And assuming it's presented at the February meeting, and the IPRP would then have access to review it thereafter. I will leave it to, if PG&E wants to respond at least about everything that went on with the embrittlement study, or the attempt to remove the coupon from Unit 1. If you guys want to just talk about that for a minute, please go ahead.
This is Gerald. I'll just note that special tooling was developed to be able to attempt to remove the coupon, and that we were not successful. So in essence, that we need to wait until we can remove the core barrel, and so that would be the subsequent outage.
And the subsequent outage for Unit 1 is sometime in early 2025, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and just just for timeline purposes, Unit 1, the current license ends in November 2024, but under the conditions from the NRC, the plan is allowed to operate past that with the pendency of the licensing application. So just to make sure everyone knows what the timeline is on all that. Are there any additional questions or comments? Okay, so I don't see any. I'm going to just do one thing. I'm going to do is share. I don't share this enough in the emails that we sent out notifying about the meetings, but where's the chat button? There is a web page on the CPUC hosts where we try to post past and current IPRP materials. And so I've put it in there. It's been there for a while. I can't say it's been super active, but there is old material and more recent material from the last meeting that we posted up there. And once the formal questions that we have for PG&E are prepared and sent to PG&E, we will post those there as well, and as well responses. And if there's additional material that's relevant to the IPRP, or if anyone has information they want us to maybe post, we can talk about putting it up there for others to look at so that it's available. So I'll try to make sure that I include that webpage in future correspondence with everybody, so that it's a little more obvious and not hidden away. It's not one of those pages that is at the top of the. It's not at the top of the drop down menu when you open the CPUC's website. I know that much. I think it's up to everybody here to make it more popular, and get it more hits. Not being a Google employee, I have no idea how that works, but you know, keep clicking, I guess. Hearing no more questions, I would note it. I think everybody here should have my email because you all responded to my invitation to be here today. If you have future questions, comments, issues, please send them to me. I kind of serve as the conductor of the IPRP orchestra, I guess, and I can circulate it among the other IPRP members for their review. And just to note, the way the IPRP works is, you know, they're again advisory to the CPUC, and a big reason the IPRP exists is because the expertise of the other members of the IPRP doesn't. We don't usually have that level of expertise on seismic issues within the walls of the CPUC. That's what we need all these wonderful people for. So I am happy to circulate things among everyone for their review and to get them to answer some of the questions that are you know, seismic questions could be complicated. So please feel free to contact me and I can get it to everybody who can answer it. And again, Bob, do you have another thing to add?
Bob Anderson
Yeah,
here.
this is Robert Clements from the DCISC.
Yeah.
The legislation, SB 846, explicitly speaks about consultation back and forth between the IPRP and the DCISC. And of course, here I am. Is there any report or anything like that expected from the IPRP after this meeting? And the second question is, when are you going to hold the next one? And maybe you don't have an exact date, but do you have a time period for it? Because it'll help us.
Right. Next meeting, these meetings are twice a year, and they've been on kind of like a 6-month calendar. So I would. Our last meeting was in May. It had initially been scheduled in April, and then we had to push it back just because of scheduling. So I think tentatively we can look in the April-May timeline, and we will get a specific date a little bit later when people's schedules are when we can kind of look at schedules a little bit better. But April or May is when the next meeting is likely to occur. And that also gives us enough time to review material that you guys approve at the next February meeting, and get comments. Because I know end of the year is when a lot of the seismic reviews that the DCISC does take place, and a lot of times they end up in that February report. And as far as material that we would submit to the DCISC, we're still reviewing the last meeting, and I don't know that there was a ton of seismic discussion in the last meeting, so it's a little, you know, we don't have comments on every single item that's in the DCISC report, though we try to look over as much as we can. But the IPRP's review and comments, we're trying to limit them to the areas where the IPRP actually has expertise. And so we will be submitting that once we kind of finish looking everything over. And if there's no more questions, I think we can end a little bit early and give everyone 24 minutes back to your schedule. So thank you everyone for being here and for all the great questions and comments. And I will be notifying everyone of the next meeting once we have a date on the schedule. So thank you again.